Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode. On this episode, I am tackling the cooling system of the car. Let me show you what I have planned. So I'm going to take off this upper radiator shroud. I'm going to replace the radiator with an F-Body radiator, something from a 1980s to 1992 F-Body, a Camaro Firebird. I'm going to redo the transmission cooling line so we'll have an external cooler, or we'll be able to plug it into the F-Body radiator. I haven't figured out which one I'm gonna do yet. Additionally, I'm going to change out the water pump, and I'm gonna check out the hoses, make sure I can swap them out if I need to. I already did the thermostat in an earlier video. Click the link above to check that one out if that's what you're here for. And I'll put everything back together and take it for a cruise. We'll start off with removing this fan shroud. And there should be two plugs, one on each side. These points here, they're really just locating pins, so don't mind those. If these are factory, and I don't know if they are, you'll have to pry up on the centerpiece, and then that'll give you what you need to get underneath this bottom piece. I will use a Harbor Freight pick tool to get at that. There we go. So center section up. All right, so once the center piece comes up, then you can get the big piece. And then boom. And of course, we got 4 10mm all across the top. And once we get those off, we can get the rest of this out of the way. While it's not necessarily needed, I just went ahead and drained my oil. I have not changed the oil since I've had it. So I went with 5W30 plus a ZDDP additive. Make sure that you're using that if you have flat tappet cams. If not, you can do serious damage to your engine. I'm using a 3387A filter as well. As I took off the filter, I noticed that there were some damaged wires here. Whoever was working on it before looks like they twisted some wires and didn't put everything back and didn't cover the exposed copper. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that in a later section. Turning back to the coolant system, there is a drain on the driver's side bottom of the radiator that you can loosen, and all of the coolant should fall out. Now, I'm not getting a steady stream or a lot of flow here, so I'm thinking that there is a partial blockage in that radiator. So I opened it up and I let as much drain as possible here. Once things slowed down to a trickle, I just grabbed the lower radiator hose, loosened it up, and pulled that off. There's a lot more coolant still left in the system, so there's not going to be any regrets when I replace this radiator. From there, I just disconnected 2 transmission cooling lines. Make sure you're being really careful with an open end wrench, or use a line wrench specifically made for these. From there, the upper radiator hose comes off, as well as the coolant expansion tank line. Those are real easy. And then you can pick the radiator up and recycle it or save it if you're looking to do that. Look what I found here. This is probably as old as the car. Now, the most annoying part of this entire job is getting the 4 nuts that are on the cooling fan off. But with enough persistence, you can do it. I believe that's another 13mm. So just go ahead and loosen that up on all sides. Switching over to the alternator, I use a 13 and a 15mm wrench to loosen the tension and remove the belt. Then I use a chisel and a hammer to create separation on the cooling fan so I can remove that, and then I can remove the pulley. There are a bunch of 13 and 15mm bolts all around the water pump, and there are at least 4 of them that go all the way to the cooling passageways. They're going to be super rusty and hard to get off, so keep your persistence level high here. Once you get them off, use a wire wheel to clean everything up and put them to the side. I'll show you what to do before you reinstall them. There's a cooling passageway hose that comes at the bottom of the alternator. Loosen that. That is your bypass valve. That shoots up coolant that goes over to the heater valve. Once everything is loosened, it should pop right off. Feeling the bearings on the water pump, they feel a little raspy. There's not a lot of play in there, but there is some residue, so I feel like it was underperforming. All right, so here we are, out with the old and in with the new. This is my 84 radiator. I'm a little iffy on if that's coolant or Freon, but just got that out of the way. We're gonna go with something that's bigger and more effective at cooling. Here's the part number for my advanced auto radiator. They had 20% off for 4th of July, so it's easy to get those savings. Let's take a look at the car and see what we're at. This radiator is supposed to be a direct fit coming from the 83 to 92 F-Body cars. So Camaro, Firebird, those should all work. So we have to take off this fitting in order to get it to work. Once you unscrew it, it'll come off like this. Be careful, there is red Loctite on there, so just be real smooth with your movements. Make sure nothing breaks off, because they won't warranty it otherwise. And you should be left with this. And then of course we'll use this for the overflow tube. All right, lines are off. Let's get it over on the car. Here it is. It's looking really good. And the only thing that you have to do is you got to guide the radiator in against this flap. It's a plastic flap that wants to apply pressure that way. So, you just keep it bent a little bit this way as you set the radiator down. And it's smooth. It fits in nicely. Everything looks okay on this side. The bottom radiator hose, it's kind of butting up against the frame. You can see in the middle shot. So what I'll do is I'll apply some more pressure on this right here, and it'll free up more room there. And just make sure that that radiator hose doesn't get eaten out, by rubbing up on the frame constantly. That's the biggest issue that I see right now. Let me start to screw in the lines. It looks good at first, so let me try to screw in these transmission cooler lines and make sure that those work. The transmission cooler lines went in, but you got to get them dead straight. You don't want to cross thread these things. Coming back to the damaged wiring on this side, it looks like it was just an eyelet that applies ground to the AC compressor bracket. So I just repaired everything with some butt connectors and some heat shrink, got everything crimped down and reinstalled. I apply RTV to all gasket surfaces on both sides of the gasket, just to level out any imperfections. All right, so the 4 longest bolts that go in there's this really super long one and then a few others, maybe about 2.5 inches long. You got to put a little bit of RTV at the end of them because they're going all the way into the block, so don't forget that. Once you reinstall those bolts and torque them down to spec, it's time to reinstall everything else. So the belt goes on, the pulley goes on, and then your coolant fan goes on over that. I drop the lower and upper clamshells of the fan shroud, torque everything down, Bluetooth pour my coolant, and then it's time to start everything right up. All right, so we've gotten to the point where we're ready for first startup. Let me catch you up. We've gotten our new water pump in. I've cleaned up everything underneath the hood, did a full engine bay cleanup. We've got our new radiator in. My air intake is just mocked up, don't mind that. I plan to swap everything out to have a true cold air intake that goes all the way here behind the headlight and down into the fender well. But that'll be on a future episode. I've removed my windshield washer bottle and my coolant overflow bottle to clean them up. I may spray paint them black. I saw a couple of pictures of people doing that on Grand Nationals and it looked really good. So I may go that route with them, at least until I get new ones. We'll see how much I like it. I'm just gonna wipe down everything that hasn't dried yet, make sure everything looks good, but yeah, check it out, everything looks good here. I've gotten the stock fan back in. I'll probably upgrade to electric fans at a later point. I really wanna see if this solves the cooling issue. And just a quick reminder on what I was experiencing. I was experiencing temperatures that went from, cold all the way up to 200, getting close to 210. And the only time it went down was when I had the heat on max and I was going slower than 25, 30 miles an hour. Everything else above that, let's say I was going 50 and I was easy on the throttle, it'll still climb. So I'm thinking it was a water pump. I'm thinking that there was either a blockage of flow, i.e. the radiator, or the water pump wasn't working. So while I had the water pump out, I just replaced the radiator while I'm at it. And the transmission cooler lines, that was really the star of the show. I didn't expect to use this radiator for transmission cooling, but it just so happened that that F-Body radiator really came in handy. It's really plug and play for our cars, so why not? All right, here goes. Where are my keys at? Fire in the hole. All right, so everything looks and sounds good. I'm gonna call it a night. It's super late and we'll hit it back in the morning. All right, so it's the next day. I've got the Grand National ready to roll. I've got the Avalanche outside. I just needed to recharge that battery. Now that it's good to go, let's get this car outside, start it up, fill it up with coolant, and take it for its first drive since. And after a scary instance of it jumping up to 210, waiting for the thermostat to open, it's finally cooling down. And it just keeps on dropping. So I'm gonna top it off, put my bottles back in, and take it for a drive. So I got everything back and I noticed we got a problem with our belt. Yeah, so our belt just spun off, it got damaged, so I need to get a replacement one and then we should be back on the road. Now at first I was thinking that we just got air trapped in the system and it airlocked, and that's why the coolant overflow was bubbling up. But this makes a lot more sense. The belt looked new when I put everything back together, but clearly that isn't the case if it's over here disintegrating on itself. So hopefully we didn't do too much damage. We didn't rise above the 225 level. So hopefully once we get a replacement belt back on there and we can check the system back over again, we'll be good to go. Jimmy and I from Peanuts Automotive Adventures were talking in a YouTube chat. I agreed with him when he said that he didn't want to take parts off of one Buick to repair another. But I swear, ever since I said that, I've been having to do the opposite in order to keep TTop running. So first it was the headlight bezels on Turbo T over here. Now it's gonna be the fan belt on my 84. I hate to be a hypocrite, but it's the 4th and I wanna drive, so gotta rob Peter to pay Paul. So I got the new belt on there and took it for a ride. This is the longest ride I've ever taken on this car, maybe about half an hour, and cooling is just rock solid, so I think we may have fixed it. And it doesn't seem like there was any damage caused by the minor overheating, so only time will tell, but I'm enjoying driving this around the Virginia roads, and I'll leave in some additional clips with full sound so you can hear the turbo spool up. I don't hear a lot of it from the downpipe in comparison to the other car, but it's noticeable. Everything is still looking good. Temperature's right around 160. The thermostat is 160, so that's perfect. And I just bought everything I need to recharge the cooling system, including a new compressor. So that'll be on the next episode of the 84. The next video you will see is working on the 87. I finally got the fuel tank and all those components in. Looking forward to showing you first start of my 87 Turbo T coming up soon. Thanks for watching.